Okay. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for inviting me to take part in this Mustang Summit panel. My name is Lynae Rogers. I am one of the Wild Horse and Burro leads for the state of Colorado. I've worked in the program off and on since the early 2000s and have been permanent in the program since 2023. And I'm just going to talk a little bit today and kind of set the stage historically of where our horses came and how the act came into play and go from there. So historically, we had horses throughout the West, ranchers, farmers, wagon wheels, wagon trails, all turned out horses. These horses all came together, and that's what kind of contributes to the wild horse population that we know today. With that, those horses were protected in the Act of 1971, which was the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act. And that act directed BLM and the Forest Service to manage these horses in herd management areas that were located on the ground at that time, where we found the horses. With that, it also mandated us to manage these horses with a thriving natural community, which means ecological sustainability. So that's what we are tasked to do. So in 1971, we had about 25,000 horses, wild horses, that were protected across the West. So, and since then, we have jumped in numbers considerably. And in 2020, we actually peaked on the range at about 95,000 acres. 95,000 horses, which is about 4 times the amount of horses that were actually allocated for our HMAs. We manage about 25 million acres, 175 herd management areas across 10 western states. In Colorado, we have 4 HMAs. So furthest north is our Sandwash Basin HMA. Then we go to Piance, Douglas, the Little Book Cliffs, and Spring Creek Basin. We do manage with what's called appropriate management levels. And in Colorado, we have 2 of our HMAs that are within our appropriate management level and 2 HMAs that are outside right now, higher than our top end of our herd management areas. So in the act, it also charges us to remove animals that are above our appropriate management levels. And there's 2 ways we do that, through 2 different types of gathers. And that is our drive traps, which are helicopter gathers, and our bait traps. Which brings us to kind of where we are today with our off-range discussions on what happens to these horses after we take them off the range. Where do they go? And that there's a lot of different answers to that, and that's where a lot of our partners come in. And so all of you guys out there who have adopted an animal, hats off to you. We greatly appreciate that. And we have our national partners. We have some of them here today. We have our Forever branded partnerships. We have our local partnerships that we work with on the ground. Especially in the state of Colorado, we have each partnership that is helping here at this adoption event, and that actually helps at every adoption event. Another place that our animals go are our off-range pastures with BLM that are managed through BLM, and that's big. That's about $101 million in 2024, and that's 70% of our budget. So go to off-range pastures. So if we had more of that money, we would have more adoption events and be able to partner more with people who place our animals. With that, we have placed over the last 5 decades about 300,000 animals, and that's due to our partnerships and what we have going. And with that, I'm going to let our partners here introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their programs.
I'm Stefanie Schafer with Wild Horse Outreach and Advocacy in Guffey, Colorado. Can you hear me well enough back there? Yes. Good. We have been gentling Mustangs since 2017, and we are coming up on 200 horses that have gone through our program. We come in where basically BLM leaves off. We get horses ungentled from BLM and gentle them and place them into suitable homes. We also gentle horses for their adopters, either directly when somebody says, I adopted a wild horse and I don't quite trust myself to do the gentling. I don't have the facility at home. I have the facility for a gentled animal. Those animals come to us. We gentle them. We then work with the adopter to make sure that animal is off to a good and smooth transition going home. And we also take horses that have gone home. The adopters have tried to gentle them and have run into roadblocks. We try to make it a smoother transition going forward. The third thing we help with is if somebody says, I am doing it myself and I hit a wall, I just need a little bit of help getting over the hump. We offer remote coaching, and I do travel to help people with their Mustangs, and we do that both through our organization as well as in partnership with the BLM via a new organization called Forever Branded that is helping the horses that tend to stay in holding longer, the ones that are plain in color, which is always a little bit sad, the sorrels, the browns, the bays, get out of holding easier and help people, give an incentive to people to adopt a gentle horse that tends to do better in a domestic setting by giving them that heads up and that leg up. People pay essentially only the adoption fee, $125, and get a gentle animal. So we offer that as well. And we are the in-between step, essentially, between BLM with the unhandled gathered horses that have been processed. They have a freeze brand, they have a Coggins test, they have their initial vetting done. We get them to where the adopter or somebody who saddle starts them or somebody who wants to maybe go on a show in one of Matt's Mustang Champions shows, the ability to do that and to succeed with their horse. The problem that we see a lot of times is people they have good intentions, they have the time, they have the money to care for a horse, they even have the horsemanship to get a horse going on their saddle. They may not have the equipment or the know-how to take them from, it doesn't want to be within 10 feet of me, to how do I get a saddle up? And then that's where Mustang Champions picks up and takes them to a whole new level of showing what these horses can do.
My name is Matt Manroe. I'm the Executive Director of Mustang Champions. We are a newer nonprofit. We have a government grant, so thank you very much for your tax dollars, to do two programs. An education program. It's interesting, a lot of Americans don't realize that they are horse owners, and as a taxpayer, you own all these horses on your public lands. So it's kind of fun to introduce that idea to some people. The education program, we have 5 kiosks that we ship to events across the country to try to get people more educated about their horses. We have a virtual reality headset that you can put on, and horses literally come up to you. So it's a fun experience for all. The other program we have are 2 new national Mustang competitions. Mustang Challenge will be happening in 2 weeks in Las Vegas at South Point Arena. $50,000 to the champion. That is our Western discipline competition. And then we have a new English discipline competition that we did for the first time last year in Rolex Stadium, Kentucky Horse Park, Lexington, Kentucky. That will be happening in September 4 to 6. Again, $50,000 to the champion. What we're trying to do is put Mustangs in premier venues, raise the prize money to get people that might not normally work with Mustangs or compete with Mustangs to get involved, to get engaged. We are very excited about the programs, especially the English program, that is something that is new and different, and there is definitely demand for Mustangs in the eastern United States, where they have mostly been in the western to mid-US from a competition standpoint. So come join us. Come to a competition, come compete. or if you know someone that might be interested, please tell them about what we're doing, and see you in Vegas or see you in Lexington, Kentucky. Scott?
Well, thank you. I'm Scott Beckstead. I'm the Chief Equine Programs Director for the Wild Animal Sanctuary, which owns and operates the Wild Horse Refuge in northwestern Colorado. The Wild Animal Sanctuary has been in existence for over 40 years. It was founded by Pat Craig, a Colorado native, who set out very early on to provide an alternative for captive-born exotic wildlife, especially large carnivores and especially big cats, and provide them with actual habitat. So we have sort of our flagship facility, which is called the Wild Animal Sanctuary, the same name as the 501c3, in Keensburg, right outside of Denver. And then we have the Wild Animal Refuge down in southeastern Colorado, which is home to both large carnivores and wild horses that have been brought in from other states. And then the third and newest facility is the Wild Horse Refuge. It is a 30,000 acre sanctuary for Colorado-born wild horses that have been removed from their range. And it is in Moffat County. It's 17 miles west of Craig, and then 5 miles north on County Road 17. It is a former working cattle ranch. The original ranch property was 23,000 acres, but we have closed on additional property, so we now have that 30,000 acres that is available to these horses. So what we do is, again, we are restricted to just Colorado-born wild horses at this facility. So we take horses that have not been adopted, that have been offered for adoption by the Bureau of Land Management, and we take those animals, we get them transferred to us, and we bring them to the Wild Horse Refuge, and basically let them live a wild, free roaming life, just like they had before they were rounded up. We are right now at just over 250 wild horses, and up until just a few weeks ago, we were only occupying the western half of our property. We have improved the fencing on the east, and so we now have horses on the eastern part of the property, but it's kind of hard to wrap your head around just how much space 30,000 acres is, but it's, one way to think of it is it's literally horizon to horizon. So these horses are basically living a life very similar to what they had before they were gathered. We let them establish their own social dynamics. They have sorted out themselves who they want to run with, how the bands are organized. Probably our two largest bands are actually led by very strong boss mares, but we also have a very charismatic celebrity horse named Michelangelo. Michelangelo is a chestnut pinto who is the grandson of the legendary Picasso, who is a stallion from the Sandwash Basin that was once known as the most popular Mustang in America. The Sandwash Basin is just about 30 miles from the Wild Horse Refuge, so a good number of our horses are Sandwash Basin horses, and they have that kind of Sandwash Basin physique and build, and a lot of them have that really interesting pinto pattern. But we also have a lot of grays, because there are a lot of gray horses at the Sandwash Basin. But we also have horses from Pions, East Douglas, Little Book Cliffs, and West Douglas. And so, but again, their social dynamics are theirs to sort out. And they literally have as much room as they need to wander and roam. We take we take their welfare very, very seriously. We want these horses to be healthy. We want them to be happy. And so we take a very sort of hands-off approach to managing them. We want them to stay wild. So we don't give them snacks. We haven't yet had to give them hay, although we do grow hay on the property. The winters have not been so bad that they couldn't forage through the snow. But again, we take the approach that we want them to stay wild. So if they need doctoring, they are doctored out on the range to the fullest extent possible. We've only had 2 horses injured, so far, but they were treated by veterinarians out on the range. They healed up great, and they're doing just fine. I'm always blown away at how tough these horses are. I mean, amazing. You know, you go out and it's 20 below zero and you expect to find them all frozen solid, but they're just out there doing the same thing they do every other day, grazing and, you know, and chasing each other around and just living their best life. They are very, this refuge property must feel very much like home, because it's very similar to their home range that they were born and grew up on. We have abundant water. That's one of the unique features of this property. We have abundant water, 14 different water sources on the property. What I find when I go out there is that the foot traffic around the water hole is a lot more mule deer and pronghorn than it is wild Mustangs. So those other wild species I've seen, golden eagles and sage grouse and all kinds of animals drinking from our water sources, pronghorns and so forth. But they also have abundant forage. We have both native bunch grasses like crested brome, as well as seeded bunch grass like crested wheatgrass. But it grows in abundance at the Wild Horse Refuge. So these horses don't have to worry about going hungry. There's always water within walking distance. When I go out to the Sandwash Basin and I see the horses out there, I'm struck by how good our horses have it, because, you know, those horses at Sandwash Basin sometimes have to walk for hours to the nearest water source. And at the Wild Horse Refuge, they've got water in abundance. So you know, it's very important for us to manage this refuge as not just a safe place for the wild horses, but also for all of the other wild species who live at the Wild Horse Refuge. And our wild horses share the range with hundreds of mule deer, pronghorn, elk, golden eagles, bald eagles, mountain lions, coyotes, brown squirrels, prairie dogs, jackrabbits, the whole suite of wild species that live there. And you know, what we find is that these horses are actually a vital component to this ecosystem. This is very much a rewilding project. We want this to be a healthy, sustainable, thriving ecosystem for the wild horses, but also for all those other wild species. So I go out there and onto the range, and I see the Mustangs living in harmony with the pronghorn. I see mixed herds of Mustangs, mule deer, and pronghorn moving together. And you know, so I think what we are showing is that these horses are a vital part of this ecosystem. And again, we have you know, 250 horses living on this property along with all those other species, and we find every day we go out there and we see that this habitat is thriving. The grass is abundant. There's no overgrazing. And so, you know, it's very important for us that we are managing this property in a wise way, in a sustainable way. We have range experts come out to the Wild Horse Refuge to conduct studies to make sure that, you know, that the range can support all of the creatures that are out there. And so we feel really good about the project, and we are not, unlike the Wild Animal Sanctuary in Kingsburg, we are not a public-facing facility. In other words, we are not just open to the general public, but we do give tours, and giving tours is probably my favorite part of this job, because every time I take someone out there and show them these horses and their beautiful condition and the abundance of other wild species, I'm always blown away too. You know, I'll take people out there and they're blown away by the wild horses, but you know what really gets them is the prairie dogs, because these chubby little prairie dogs, we have a lot of them, and we also have a lot of very chubby coyotes and badgers because we have so many prairie dogs. But it's just it's kind of a mind-blowing experience to go out onto, and you see just how vast this is, how much room these horses have, and the condition that these horses are in. We had just a handful of older horses that were on the thin side coming out of the winter, which we expect, but they are now at a body score of 5, 6, or even 7, in great shape. The other thing about these horses that I think is different from the domestic horses that you see is that they are constantly on the move. They are constantly moving. Their feet, they all look like they just had their farrier appointment last week because their feet, they're constantly moving over this rocky, sandy ground, and so their feet are always in great shape. They move really good. You know, you've got some bands of older horses that tend to you know, they're always, you know, walking or trotting, but then we've got this group called the Naughty Nine, and they're all these young bachelors, and they're just total dorks, and they run everywhere, and you know, you'll see, we always have these pool parties on hot days like this where, you know, some of the older horses are just kind of standing around, and here come the Naughty Nine, and they blow everything up, and they want to, you know, all the older horses are like, oh God, here they come again. And, but you get a real range of personalities out there, and, you know, because we try very hard to keep these horses wild, there are some horses that want absolutely nothing to do with people, and they will stay away, and they will, if they see you coming, they'll move away. And then there's some that are just very curious, and they just want to come up and get all up in your business, but we try and minimize that contact so that they can stay wild. Anyway, I could go on, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And of course, I'd really love, if you're ever interested, go to wildhorserefuge.org, sign up for a tour, and we'd love to show you around. So, happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Of course. Well, first, can you load me some badgers? And secondly, how do you handle reproduction, and what influence does that have on the behavior and condition of the horses?
Yeah, so because we're getting these horses from the Bureau of Land Management or from people who have adopted from the Bureau of Land Management, all of the male horses are gelded. You know, we still see stallion behaviors out there on the range. We'll see some sparring, and we'll see, you know, even some kind of like mating behaviors if a mare comes into heat. You know, what we don't have are those really nasty, vicious fights. They're just, you know, they have no desire to really mix it up. And you know, again, you'll see some of the stallions kind of playing with each other and chasing each other around, but it's not that really serious conflict that you'll see out there in wild HMAs. So we really, you know, we don't have any reproduction going on, and we do have some new babies from a group of Mesa Verde horses that we got from the Mesa Verde National Park.
That was my deal,
Yeah. Oh, that was you. Oh, well, that family came to us, and unlike the BLM, the National Park Service doesn't geld the horses or do any of that. So we gelded that stallion and the two young colts in that family. But in the meantime, before we got them, he had bred these mares. So we now have 4 little babies. But other than that, we don't have babies and we don't have reproduction. And that's a really important part of the process, because we want to be able to help more horses. And if we have reproduction and we have babies, then that is going to reduce the number of horses that we can bring in that have been rounded up. So.
And then what about the condition of the mares then, if they're not reproducing? Are they in better shape?
I mean, I think they're in better shape. I mean, you know, having foals takes its toll on a mare. So these mares are all in really. Some of them look like they're going to have a litter, just because there's a lot of feed on the property. But no, they're all in really great shape. And overall, I would say the mood, the atmosphere is very harmonious, and it's just a joy to watch. Sure.
About how many horses can you handle on your property?
That's kind of an open question, because again, we do these regular range analyses to make sure that we're not overloading the range. We've had about 200 horses on half the property. We're now at just over 250, and we've opened up the other half. So we'll see. My educated guess is that we could take hundreds more and still have a thriving range. But that's just That's just my guess, and we'll kind of see as we go along. We'll see how the land responds as we bring in additional horses.
Do you guys have to euthanize the horses that you pull off when you have a roundup? You said there's about 90,000 horses right now
So-
open in the ranges.
Yeah, right now we have around 60,000, that are out, and we have about 68,000 unadopted horses. When we do our gathers, there's always that chance, whether it's, a drive trap with a helicopter or whether you're doing a bait and trap, that we have a fatality or we have to euthanize. The good thing is, BLM has one of the most safest records. When you put us up against like any other entity that is having to gather wild animals, whether it be deer or elk or whether you're collaring sheep. So we do have one of the safest records on that. In the state of Colorado, we have a very low gather-related fatality or euthanasia, so we haven't had to do that very often. That doesn't mean, that we can mitigate to zero, because you can't, there's just no way that you can do that. But we do use our comprehensive animal welfare program. We do follow our protocol, and all of our people are trained in that comprehensive animal welfare program, and we do take that very seriously. We have our auditors that come out to different gathers, and they just pop in, and they're like, are you following these standards? And we are graded on those standards along with our contractors. So from that standpoint, yes, on occasion you do have to euthanize, Is it something that we like to see? No, nobody likes to see that, but it does.
When the horses do come off the range, how many are really ill that you do have to?
So depending on the range and depending on where we're at, that's where we get to that animal management that we have and the levels of that we have on those horses out there. So that really starts with, and this is kind of going on range, but where we're at on the ground, what that soil can produce, what plants are out there, the sustainability that the Act tells us we need to manage in an ecologically sustainable manner, thriving natural communities. So when we have that, and we can actually grow these horses from the ground up, and we have healthy ground, then we're gonna have healthy horses. If you've got horses that are coming off really skinny, that land is already damaged, and you're not gonna notice that nearly as much. So if you're seeing skinny horses, you already have compromised your range condition. With that said, droughts come into play, all of that. And so you do have some horses that are coming off in a body condition scores of 2s and 3s, and then we get them, we worm them, we vaccinate them, we prep them, and all of that. And then we start getting, and we'll start seeing that compensatory gain where they're gaining that weight back. And so yes, we do see lower body condition scores coming off the range.
Sorry, but do you feel that what you guys are doing really are saving these animals, right?
Oh, and not only are we saving those animals that come off, we're saving the animals that we leave on, because there's more resources out there for those animals that are in that appropriate management level. There's more resources out there to go around, so we want those animals to be healthy on the range, and we want the ones that we're taking off the range to become healthy, so that we have our partners like Stefanie, like Matt.
Yeah. These are
You know,
amazing programs.
And all of that. So we had a lady in the back that had a question.
Go ahead.
It's an observation or maybe a clarification. The Wild Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act of 1971 didn't call for herd management areas or appropriate management levels. It specifically stated that wild horses were to be managed in a thriving natural ecological balance where they were found in a self-sustaining numbers. Those were the management framework plans in the 80s actually brought up the herd management areas, and that was changed
So we look at, the herd areas that we had, where the animals were initially found. Then we had the HMAs, which actually said, this is where we're going to manage for horses. And we have lost some of, those herd areas, totally agree with you there. And when we looked at that, we were looking at percent public versus private land in those areas, conflicts, and all of that. So we ended up with the 4. That's how we ended up with 4 HMAs in Colorado. However, we are kind of unique in that is we have one of the ranges in Colorado, which is really unique because it's one of the ones that we have that do not have livestock competition. So, and that was actually done back in the 1980s, that we have a wild horse range. It's not just an HMA.
Right.
So we're kind of unique in Colorado that way that at least one of our herd areas is, we have an HMA.
Came out for
Yeah,
state
so-
legislatures on that.
So that was
Cows
fun.
got the ones with the water, horses got the first range, but super kudos to BLM and all of the people that managed them initially after that, because they set up an awful lot of water systems up there and definitely did a great job of managing, bringing in horses, because they weren't self-sustaining in the numbers that they had. And then Gerald brought in a lot of horses to definitely boost the genetic viability.
We have brought in several stallions in the
Yes.
past, and some mares,
Some mares
both sides.
From Utah.
Yep.
This is kind of a silly question, because I'm uneducated in a lot of things. But is there more common problems or illnesses or diseases that you find that are more common in wild horses than domesticated ones? Like have there been any more problems that have come up, or perhaps like in the opposite, like is there less of a problem, like any diseases, injuries that you've seen less of because they're
So I think that can go both ways when you look at injuries, from an injury standpoint. There are horses that, break their legs out on the range. That's a given. We've seen it. If we come across that, then BLM does humane euthanize those horses. They have a lot of, and depending on which HMA you're in, Little Book Cliffs is very rugged, and Sandwash Basin's a little, not as much. But from an injury standpoint, I think it could be, I don't know the solid answer to that, but you've got your performance horses that have injuries, and you've got horses that are on the range that have injuries. I think it's just the type of injury that those horses would have, that would depend on where they are. When you're looking at disease transmission, when you bring horses off the range and you introduce them to that domestic lifestyle, there's a reason that our animals are quarantined for as long as they are when they come off the range. We do have protocol in place for vaccinations. So it's just like when you go overseas to certain countries, you have to go get certain vaccinations to go over there because you're not exposed to what is there. So it's that same thing. So we vaccinate when they come off the range.
I have 2 Mustangs, and I used to get thoroughbreds off the track when I was a teenager, and we'd teach them to jump. I will tell you that my Mustangs are much more resilient, much easier to care for, have many fewer issues, and my memories of the thoroughbreds that I used to compete with.
And I can tell you, at the Wild Horse Refuge, we have not had any issues with any sort of disease at all. Now, they come to us, if they come from the BLM, they've been vaccinated by the BLM. And then if they come to us from, like a private owner that is transferring them to us, we have them make sure that they've got their Coggins test and all that. But I can tell you, just being out there in a wide open space and living a natural life just sort of lends itself to a much healthier animal.
And some of these animals have to travel 20 miles between forage and water. So they're putting in 40 miles a day versus domestic horses we tend to put in stalls. So I think that it's hard. In my experience of filming on the range, it was hard to find horses that didn't look good, even when they were stressed with not enough water and not enough forage.
I'd like to add something to that, to be fair to the horse and the people that bring these horses home and work with them. I'm from Germany, that's why I sound the way I do. And the Germans are now bringing Mustangs to Germany. They have their own Mustang makeover competition, and they have been primarily getting horses from Oregon. Oregon has some really, really nice Mustangs. They've been noticing funny symptoms, and it turns out that there's a number of those horses that have PSSM. I don't know which one or two, but that is something that as you get to working with the horse, that can happen. So it's something to look for. It's a genetic thing. It happens. Another thing that we see, and that I also point out to all of our doctors, and pointed out earlier to somebody that has a domestic horse that attended my presentation earlier today, is body pain. What you'll realize on the other side of 30, and it's coming, it's not the age, it's the mileage, and for me, it's all been dirt roads. And that's the way it is for Mustangs too. If you adopt a 12-year-old, right, you have a horse that has not been, and horses do interesting things, even in a domestic setting. But you have a horse that has lived a pretty rugged life, and that is something to consider. And what we ask of all of our adopters, and sometimes we even do it before we adopt these horses out, is assess for any body pain and get a chiropractor out there before you ever climb up there. Because working up against pain is not fair. I work with and I help a lot of adopters, and a lot of, unfortunately, they can't talk, a lot of behavioral problems come back to pain. So we see that quite a bit. And to be fair to the horse, assess for body pain. Because, you can picture that maybe mares get bred at a year old. They start foaling at 2, maybe not quite 2. The boys are doing what the boys do. They fight with each other. They fight over mares. The winters are long and hard in the West. And there is, if your horse comes in with a swollen leg, you can be out there cold hosing them for the next week. The horses out there don't have that luxury. So for the working with Mustangs in now a domestic setting, to set everybody up for success, you'd be bucking too if your back hurt, right? So they're not mystical creatures. They can't talk. They can't vocalize quite as much or as obviously as, say, a dog. So if somebody brings them home, I always ask for your own sake and that of your animal. Make sure that they're free from pain, so you're really actually working with a clean slate. And that's just something, because they are so stoic. You know what? Because when you're in a herd and there is a predator out there, if you're the one limping and really slow, guess who's for dinner? So they become pretty stoic. They're really good at, I'm fine. So, but they may really not be. And then we're putting them in settings where it's like, let's do a nice load transition. So let's load in this trailer, let's tie, let's do all these different things. And we're all a little bit cranky when the head hurts, the leg hurts. So it's really, really important to make sure as we're working with these horses to check that they're comfortable. Ulcers is another thing that we see because of, stress, changing scenery, change in feed. So we have seen actually addressing the husbandry issue, addressing the health part, can take care of a lot of the behavioral stuff and then make for happier horses and happier and safer adopters too.
So I think one last thing I'd like to take away, you guys to take away, is, these horses are very athletic when they are pain-free. They're very versatile horses. I don't know if anybody noticed it, or if you saw it on the news, but I just happened to catch a glimpse of the left side of a neck on those horses that were going into North Carolina that were actually taking provisions in to those hurricanes and those floods. And you can't help it, have your heart swell a little bit knowing that, hey, we worked with some of those horses and those horses got to come off the range and there's places for horses on the range and there's places for horses off the range. And their versatility from showing in the show ring to packing to just being your horse in the backyard to going to a sanctuary that may have a behavioral issue or something that people can't handle and it needs to go live out its life and be a horse. We have them all. So working with our local partners, working with our national partners, and events like this hats off to everybody who comes out, enjoys our Mustangs and our wild horses, and we greatly appreciate your time and your help and your education. So, thank you.
And we do things kind of in two different ways when we adopt out horses and, our adopters get them home. Like, I am team Maine on the right because I want everybody to see the Freeze brand. And then when somebody's riding on my left, what are you riding there? And I'm like, that's a Mustang. That's a Mustang. And that's what I want. Like, I want my own horses and the ones I adopt out. I have some adopters that choose to keep the mane on the left so you can't see it, and I adopted out one that looks like a $100,000 warm blood, And so, and if they want to ride around on their fake warm blood until somebody says, where'd you get that one, and they roll the mane back, So I like that. But I have gotten a lot of, even from ranchers, that's a Mustang, that's a pretty horse. Yeah, that's a Mustang, that's a pretty horse. So, ideally, and we've got our organization, we have horses coast to coast. We've got them pulling logs, we've got them packing, we've got them eventing, we've got them in, ranch and trail competitions. They're doing all kinds of different things. And I always love seeing how people navigate that, whether they're either blending in and going, yeah, my horse is doing what yours is doing, or whether they're, yep, this is a Mustang and I want everybody to see it. But they really can, and it's really important for us when we send horses out and we pair them up with adopters, that we make it a good fit, because my idea is the butterfly effect, because then every Mustang that goes out becomes a ambassador for the Mustang and for the cause, and it's better to, not just talk about it, but be about it, and not just tell them, but show them. And then 5 people are like, that's cool, I didn't know Mustangs could do that, I didn't know Mustangs could look like that, maybe I would want one, and that goes so much further than just, being talked to.
So one of the requirements to come to one of our competitions is you have to show proof that you have shown the horse before you bring it into our competitions. Part of that is just to showcase how talented they are, get them into events and competitions and in front of people that might not normally see them because it's a breed competition. So these are things that we're just trying to do to show how versatile and talented a Mustang can be.
Hey, Matt, I have a question for you. Can someone compete a branded Forest Service Mustang? It's gotta have.
Must be a BLM.
I wish that they would brand those horses for numerous reasons. I haven't done this part.
There are competitions with Forest Mustangs, but no, we are absolutely in partnership with the Wild Horse and Burro program.
Well, you're in partnership with Forest Service, so it's confusing.
All right, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.